Welcome back, Lettermen Row watchers, listeners, fans, readers, everyone around the world. This is Jeremy Birmingham. We are talking stuff about Ohio State recruiting brought to you by our good friends at Buyers Auto. If you're buying an auto, go to Buyers Auto. On the other line with me today is Spencer Holbrook, and we are once again going videoless, at least for this week, as we experiment with some new ways to bring you content and new ways to figure out the best way to broach this, great unknown that we're working into with the coronavirus scare. Spencer, what's up?
Not much. I'm quarantined. Not because I'm sick, but because I'm trying to stay healthy.
Good idea. Everyone should be self-quarantining, as much as that pains me. See, the funny thing is I've been looking for years for a reason to stay home and never see other people. And now, I feel like I should. I constantly am thinking of ways to get out of the house. Maybe I need to go get another gallon of milk. I haven't drank a gallon of milk in 10 years, but yet for some reason I have 4 in the fridge.
Yeah, I've made 5 trips to the grocery store in the last week, and I don't really know why.
Yeah, it's just been that kind of time. Everyone's stocking up on whatever they can, including the Ohio State recruiting class of 2021. Spencer, the Buckeyes have stocked up. There have been 4 commitments since Sunday afternoon when Ja'Kalen Johnson decided to end his recruitment by committing to Ohio State. It's crazy. These things, I want to be clear, these 4 guys that committed, and Ja'Kalen Johnson, Devontae Smith, Evan Pryor, and Andre Turrentine, all of them have said that they were thinking about committing to Ohio State for a long time. So it's not I don't think that the outbreak scare and the dead period stuff that's going on forced them into doing it. But I think that those guys probably realize hey, a lot of other people who may not be sure are going to have this time where they're sitting at home, not making any sort of visits, and it makes more sense to just get in right now while they fit in.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, this is going to be a limited class. You're not really sure what the number is going to be exactly, but you know that Ohio State's going to be pretty tight on a number crunch again next year, like they are, seems like every year. So you're not really sure how many guys they're going to take. And when the Buckeyes say, hey, we're taking 5 defensive backs, or hey, we're taking 2 running backs, and you want to be one of those spots, you better get in now, or else you're going to be left behind, it seems, because that class is filling up quickly.
Right, and they've taken 3 defensive backs now in the last 2 days, and the question is ultimately, do they have 3 defensive backs or do they have 4? Because Jalen Johnson, while he certainly is penciled in right now as a safety, I can't help but think that there's a good chance if things don't go the way they want with Barrett Carter, that maybe Jalen Johnson is the guy that fits the most natural to slide into that bullet combination hybrid position that they think that Barrett Carter could fill. So it's just interesting to see how they're going to play this out, because there's so many other defensive backs that they're still looking for. Of course, Tony Grimes, who was supposed to make a 3-day trip to Columbus this spring, that's obviously not going to happen. I think that you can pretty much remove Ohio State from being a true contender in that recruitment for now. If he decides to push his recruitment into the fall, then maybe they have an opportunity to get back in that if they have any room. Jordan Hancock obviously committed to Clemson. Ohio State remains in conversation with him and with his family, but the truth is nobody ever really decommits from Clemson. That's going to be one very difficult flip to happen if they think they can. And I think the main goal right now, Spencer, is to find one more safety and one more cornerback.
There's plenty of them out there, too, that Ohio State's interested in. You've got a guy like Jalen Davies. You've got a Hunter Washington still out there, even somewhat in the lower on the totem pole. So it seems they're lower on the totem pole, Avante Dickerson. And then, obviously, there's Derek Davis, who's a big fish out there still ready for Ohio State to kind of make a move on that. So it's going to be difficult right now, but, God gave us FaceTime, and this is a good time for Ohio State to start using it.
Derek Davis is interesting. His father, Derek Davis Sr., told me that he was planning on visiting Ohio State maybe 3 times this spring. And my initial thought was that if you're visiting one school 3 times in a 6-week stretch, you have a pretty good idea that that's where you're going to be going to school. Obviously, those visits aren't going to happen, and so you wonder how that impacts Ohio State. Ohio State, Clemson, Penn State are all very much in the mix for Derek Davis. Michigan, Notre Dame still trying to stay involved. But ultimately, go ahead.
That's going to be a recruitment down to the wire. I feel like. I think that's going to be a very good battle to watch moving forward.
Well, he's been to both places, Ohio State and Penn State, so many times. But then you have the pull of Clemson, which obviously we can't continue to ignore. But it is, in my experience covering recruiting, Pittsburgh area kids are a little bit different than a lot of other kids around the country. They are generally kids who want to stay close to home, which is why I think Ohio State and Penn State are the two teams that are really in the driver's seat for Derek Davis. But, the question is, how long does he want to wait, knowing that if Ohio State is near the top of his list or at the top of his actual list, do you risk it? Or do you just wait and see what happens this summer? And that's the thing. A guy like him, Ohio State is not going to pass up no matter what. So that's
they'll find room for him in the class. They'll find room for him.
Right. And the same could be said for Jordan Hancock if he ever got to the point where he wanted to flip. But that can't be said for players like Jansen Dunn out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, who was offered by Ohio State 2 weeks ago. As I wrote and talked about on this show, Ohio State is the leader there. The only real other competitor in that competition for his recruitment is Oklahoma. And if he's not been to Oklahoma and now he can't go to Oklahoma until the season, for example, it's I don't know, man. It just seems like a kid that, if we're talking about guys who might want to decide to pull the trigger, knowing how he feels about Ohio State, and he's been very glowing about the Buckeyes in his reviews after visiting there in November and then visiting again in early March. It's pretty much a sign to me that he's a guy to watch. But his father, Mitchell Dunn, told me that he is planning on being in sort of a standstill right now. And, how long does that last?
I think it's a little dangerous to be in a standstill if you're a guy looking at Ohio State because, we just saw 4 commits in 48 hours or 72 hours or whatever it is. A class can fill up really quickly at Ohio State. And I don't know how I would feel if I was trying to make a decision and seeing all these guys commit. There's got to be a little bit of pressure, not put on by Ohio State, but just naturally saying, hey, this class is filling up really quickly. You might want to get on board now.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's the same situation, I think, that on a little bit more high profile basis that the Buckeyes are going to be in when it comes to the running back position. Now that Evan Pryor is committed, and Evan Pryor is the number 5 ranked running back in the nation, obviously an elite player. But at this point, the top 2 running backs in the country, and Travion Henderson and Donovan Edwards up there in West Bloomfield, Michigan, who Ohio State's been the presumptive leader for both of them, now are in a position where maybe they have to stop their process, knowing they can't take visits anywhere, and knowing you can't take any visits anywhere probably till at least June, maybe longer if you listen to what the president said on Monday. This could go into August. If that happens, then do those 2 just race to get into the Ohio State class? Do they just know that they have a position of power and say, hey, we're going to wait until the fall before we make any decisions? I don't get the impression that either one of them had any intent to wait that long to begin with.
I think it's going to be very interesting for Ohio State moving forward because they're going to continue to recruit both of these guys, but at the same time, they have to say, hey, one of you's in. And if you want in, get in because it's the other guy's gonna do it. Because I think both of them, Ohio State's leading for both of them. And so I think it's going to be really interesting with the addition of Evan Pryor now. The public decision of Evan Pryor, I imagine Ohio State's known about this for a little bit now, but the public decision of Evan Pryor, it's going to be really interesting to see what Tony Alford and the Buckeyes do. And I'm really happy, just on a personal note, for Tony Alford to get a little bit of a monkey off his back and stop hearing a little criticism for a while.
Yeah, and the thing with those guys is that both Travion Henderson and Donovan Edwards and Evan Pryor, for that matter, have all said they want to play with a second big-time running back in this class. None of them are scared of it. So Evan Pryor's decision doesn't force them to make a decision based on, hey, I need to get into a class. But like knowing that right now there's really only 2 guys left. And I know there's a lot of other names at running back like Corey Kiner and Lavassier Carroll and Will Shipley and guys all over the country that could fill that role. But like now the position that the Buckeyes are in, which is much more of a selection position as opposed to a, open borders type situation. I think they really are going to be picky, and it comes down to driving the relationships with Henderson and Donovan Edwards and saying, we want one of you guys, please just let us know which one it's going to be. And I think that right now it feels like remarkably, it might be Travion Henderson who's closest to the situation. I talked to his coach, Ricky Irby, on Monday, and Ricky Irby told me that Ohio State's his leader right now. And I asked him, I said, is there any chance in your mind that he would commit before taking a visit to Ohio State? And his coach said what I didn't think he would say, which was absolutely not. His coach said, who knows, this virus thing has changed everything. And that's, I don't want to say that's saying something without saying something, but it certainly lit a doorbell in my mind. I don't know if you light a doorbell or not, but it rang a doorbell. Do I have a doorbell in my mind?
I don't know what's going on in your mind, Berm. I'm not going to lie. I have no idea.
It made my ears perk up, and it felt like, again, like there was something being said that wasn't being said. So I'm just, I obviously took a little bit of heat from the old Clemson world when I said Jordan Hancock was going to be a Buckeye if he returned to visit Ohio State, which I still believe. I mean, if he returns to visit to Ohio State, he will be a Buckeye. Nothing's changed there in my mind when it comes to that prediction, which was very simple.
Is that another double down,
No.
Berm?
Yeah, again, it's the same prediction. If he returns to Ohio State, he'll end up at Ohio State. That's the prediction. But anyway, if Travion Henderson is anywhere close to making a decision, that's very good news for Ohio State, I think, because they're the leader. They're close enough to home where, again, Oklahoma is the other team I think is really involved here just based on their offense and what they can do for running backs and DeMarco Murray is the new running backs coach. But the relationship that Travion Henderson has with Tony Alford, with Al Washington, with Ryan Day separates him from separates Ohio State from the pack when it comes to the rest of the teams chasing him, even though he's never been on campus. And that's weird.
That's the J.K. Dobbins effect, right? J.K. Dobbins had never visited campus and committed to Tony Alford and then had an incredible career and had 2,000 yards rushing. Travion Henderson could do the exact same thing. Again, this virus has changed everything. We can't even be in our office right now, let alone, Travion Henderson coming from Virginia to visit Columbus to see if he wants to go to college there in 2021.
Yeah. And it's what I talked about with Austin on Lettermen Live on Monday was like, does it really matter? Do campuses really matter? Does any kid in America at this point, a high profile football recruit, if you took 100 high profile football recruits every single year, is 1 or 2 of them going to give a crap about what a campus looks like?
Well, the thing that I always go back to is it was really eye opening after the Penn State game. We saw some recruits going out on the field in the rain to get their picture taken on the field. Do you remember that, Berm? And like there was no walking around campus in the rain. There was no walking around campus in the rain.
Right, Donovan Jackson and J.C. Latham, a few other guys, yeah.
But instead of going and walking around campus in the rain after the game, they went on the field in the and made sure to take their pictures on the field, and that's more telling than anything. Like these guys care about the stadium they're going to be playing in and the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. They don't care about the Thompson Library or the Oval or what the campus rec center looks like. It's just that's irrelevant.
Right. 90% of the time that they're on campus, when they're not in class, they're going to be in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and that's it. The rest of campus life doesn't really matter. So what matters is getting a chance to talk to the academic advisors and figure out what type of programs they have academically for students, which you can do over the phone, which you can do over FaceTime. Like, it doesn't matter what the trees look like on campus. It doesn't matter to a kid from Richmond, Virginia, if Ohio State's campus has nice, blooming flowers on it. Like, who cares? So does him not getting to campus outweigh the fact that everything else that Ohio State is presenting and showing him about their plan for him, about their running back opportunities, the depth chart, the way that they use the position, the chance to win Big Ten and national championships, the chance to get drafted, blah, 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 blah. Does any of that stuff weigh less than a campus tour? I don't think so.
There is part of me, though, Berm. A lot of these guys commit, they say it felt like home when I visited. And I think there is an important aspect of that where you have to feel comfortable in the area that you are in. And so I think there is still value to the visit that Trayvon Henderson could take. But at the same time, you look at production, and then, we haven't even talked about the Real Life Wednesday program, which is kind of the supplemental. It's kind of it's what they look at instead of going on the campus tour. They get the tour of what Real Life Wednesday can do for them. And so there is still that academic side of it. It's just different for these guys than it is for an international student who comes from, I don't know, Munich to see if they want to go to Ohio State. Ohio State football, they show them Real Life Wednesday and the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. International students, they show them the library and the academic buildings.
Right, but it's also, when you say feels like home, what you're talking about, what these guys are talking about when they say it, it's not, I mean, again, yes, Columbus, Ohio is going to feel a lot more like home to a kid from St. Louis like J.K. Johnson than Clemson will. A kid from Richmond, Virginia is going to feel more at home in a city like Columbus than he's going to feel in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So when they're saying home, it feels like home. They are talking, I guess, a little bit about the environment and the atmosphere. But what they're really talking about is the relationships with the people. And that's what Ohio State is, where they're winning when it comes to Trayvon Henderson right now. It's where they've been winning with Donovan Edwards. And, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I just feel like I'm not going to be surprised if Trayvon Henderson makes a decision this week. But if he doesn't make a decision this week, I wonder if he'll then hold off until the summer, which is fine for Ohio State as well, because then at least he's going to take a round of visits.
Yeah, and I think one thing we need to discuss about this, and I had already touched on it a little bit, is Tony Alford is doing a fantastic job with this running back situation. He built great relationships in the class of 2020. He built great relationships in the class of 2019. They just were really loud outs. And finally he's starting to see some outfield grass in the hits that he's making, and it's pretty crazy because, like I said, he made great relationships in the last two classes. Things just didn't fall in his direction.
You can hit a rocket shot line drive and it can still get caught. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just need the ball to bounce your way. And what you saw with Bijan Robinson in 2020 was a kid who the ball didn't bounce their way. His family wanted him to stay a little bit closer to home. Maybe a family that wants someone to stay a little bit closer to home is the reason why Trayvon Henderson will end up picking Ohio State over Oklahoma. It's sometimes it just bounces back the other way. It's nothing and has never been anything to do with the way that Tony Alford recruits. And the people who have continued to say that it does are just flat out misinformed at best. And perhaps, much more nefarious reasoning at worst. But the reality is that Tony Alford has done a fine job recruiting. He has not signed a top 100 running back since Brian Snead in 2018. But, you don't need to. That year they signed Snead and Master Teague and thought they were in good position. In 2019, you go out and you get Marcus Crowley, who was the player of the year in Florida, and Steele Chambers, who is one of the best athletes in the country, even though you thought maybe he was going to end up playing linebacker. But, the thing is, 2020, the ball just bounced the wrong way. And you look now at 2021 and the ball bounces back. That's the nature of sports. You lose out on 2 targets in 2020 at a place like Ohio State. The odds of you going out and getting 2 damn good targets in 2021 is pretty high, because the kids are smart enough to understand that there's a gap in the running back room. And hey, Ohio State running backs can run for 2,000 yards and get drafted and do it in 400 carries.
It's pretty crazy to me. Ohio State doesn't need a sales pitch. It's Ohio State. But then once you give Ohio State a sales pitch, you're seeing what can happen. 2021 is the prime example. Like Ohio State didn't need a sales pitch to get wide receivers, but look what happened when they got Brian Hartline to be their wide receiver coach. Everything just exploded because you're already getting guys just because you're Ohio State. You're already in the conversation. But then once you get something elite in there to help that, it becomes even more. And now you're seeing that with running backs. They didn't need a sales pitch. Archie Griffin, Eddie George, J.K. Dobbins, Ezekiel Elliott, Carlos Hyde, the list goes on. You know, you don't need a sales pitch for to be Ohio State's running back. But when you have a slip in recruiting in 2019 and 2020, hey, that just gives you an even bigger sales pitch to work with. Say, hey, we're Ohio State, and oh, by the way, you know, there's this elephant in the room we need to discuss, and that's the running back situation. And so you're seeing what happens now where 3 of the top 5 backs in the country are jockeying to all get in this class before it's too late.
Yeah, we are here talking stuff about Ohio State football recruiting, brought to you by our good friends at Buyers Auto. If you're going to buy an auto, go to buyersauto.com. Spencer Holbrook, I'm Jeremy Birmingham. We've talked about Ja'Kalen Johnson and the push now that the Buckeyes can make for defensive backs. We've talked about the uncommitted running backs, but we haven't really talked about the guys who committed. J.K. Johnson, who is the top 4 player in the country at his position, the number 1 player in Missouri. I asked him who he tries to emulate in his game, and he said Jeff Okudah. He's been where Jordan Hancock, I think, was probably the number 1 player on the board at the cornerback position for Ohio State. Ja'Kalen Johnson was a very close second. And so that's a huge win for the Buckeyes. It's another big win in St. Louis. Devontae Smith, when Austin Ward and I were in North Carolina last week, we filmed an episode of Talking Stuff, and that was last Wednesday. And I said, I expect that you'll see Devontae Smith pick up an offer soon. That was after learning of the Jordan Hancock decision to Clemson. He was offered the next day and committed the day after that. He is, from what I've heard from people around the Buckeyes program, kind of a Garyon Conley type, maybe a little bit raw right now, Spencer, but athletically is elite. And I don't know, man. Maybe it's the Ohio boy in me, but I just freaking love it. Freaking love it when Ohio cornerbacks end up in the class.
And they pretty much always work out too. You know, Ohio State has good track record with cornerbacks, and you know, if you can get one local that's worthy of an Ohio State offer, then I guess you can't really complain about it in any fashion, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have the Denzel Wards and the Marshawn Lattimores and the Garyon Conleys of the world that in the last handful of years, you know, maybe weren't the highest rated guys. I mean, obviously Lattimore was a 4-star, Conley was a 4-star, but he played more wide receiver in high school at Massillon and was initially committed to Michigan. You know, I think we just have an opportunity in Ohio to see. I've talked about it before, and maybe it's just romanticizing the notion or something, but like, It does mean something special to those kids. And if you watch the Bermanology episode with Devontae Smith, like you can see it. The kid is wanting to jump through the screen talking about how excited he was to have the opportunity to be offered by Ohio State and commit to Ohio State. And I don't know. It's really great to see it.
Yeah, there's a personal aspect there where, you know, a kid grows up, you know, dreaming of playing for Ohio State, and then all of a sudden he gets the offer and he basically instantly commits because, you know, he's just so excited. And it's interesting. And Ohio State just continues to do well and put that fence around Ohio, but also take this national recruiting approach that they're getting really good at.
Yep, for sure. And then you have, you know, Andre Turrentine, who committed on Tuesday morning. And Turrentine, I'm telling you what, again, maybe it's my fault, similar to going out there and talking to Javari Ritzy last week in North Carolina, but I think in some ways, like we can't talk about everyone all the time. And especially if the kids themselves are not self-promoters, then it makes it easier to kind of forget them, I guess, because, you know, a lot of times what we write about and dotting the I's and talk about on Talking Stuff is reactive to what kids are posting or what's being said around the country. And Turrentine hasn't really said much. But he visited in November and basically told me when we filmed his commitment interview for Bermanology that he knew what he was going to do since then. And like nobody's talked about him. So it's just one of those situations where you look at a guy who 6 foot, 185, 190 pounds. And if you watch the tape of Andre Turrentine, his huddle film shows a guy that really likes to hit. And the Buckeyes comparison, I guess, would be like a Von Bell, maybe a Damon Webb a little bit, a guy that started at corner and moved around and ended up as a safety, a cover safety. So I just think it's, a really great fit for the Buckeyes, even though people don't really know much about him.
And, I'll relate this to the class as a whole. When you get a Ja'Kalen Johnson and an Andre Turrentine in the same 48-hour span, that's how you rack up the guys to get a number one class. Getting an Andre Turrentine, the number 14 corner, I think that's what he is in the country, is great for any program. Any program in the country would love to have him as their number one defensive back in their class. But, oh, by the way, if you add two more guys that are, of the same ilk, that's how you build out a class that can compete for the number one spot in the country. And I think, what the Buckeyes have done at defensive back just in the last, now I think 72 hours, but, in the 48 hours since Ja'Kalen Johnson committed, is they are filling out this defensive class to be just as good as it's going to be on the offensive side of the ball. And that's where people had questions about Ryan Day. Where was the recruiting going to go defensively when he first got hired? Because, he's such an offensive-minded guy. But you're seeing that this defensive class is going to be absolutely special with defensive backs in it. And I think Kerry Combs, Al Washington, everybody who's done a piece on this defensive recruiting is going to deserve a pat on the back for what they're doing right now.
Yeah, Turrentine, I mean, his ranking has been a little bit all over the place. He's now the 6th ranked safety in the country. So, they've adjusted where they see him.
Safety, corner, he's a defensive back, I guess. Because it's weird because if you go to his 24/7 profile, it says cornerback on his prospect info, but it says safety as his ranking.
Yeah, it is a little bit bizarre. But again, that's the flexibility, I guess. I mean, number one, those networks are constantly changing their stuff, but it provides a little bit of glimpse, I guess, into his ability to be all over the field. I can tell you, when I started writing the analysis piece for the Turrentine commitment, which will go on the website on Wednesday, we're just trying to space that out a little bit. It said he was the 14th ranked cornerback, and then by the time he committed on Tuesday morning, it said he was the 6th ranked safety. So he's flexible, and is so flexible, in fact, that everyone can't keep up what position he plays. But go ahead.
And that's why I wanted to, just highlight how flexible all of these guys are. They could play anywhere in this defense, and Ohio State's giving themselves the kind of flexibility, running an NFL-style defense that Jeff Hafley ran, and now running another simple but NFL-style defense that Kerry Combs is going to run. All of these guys can play anywhere in the defensive backfield, and it just goes back to what you talked about a few weeks ago, Berm, that we can continue to touch on. It's almost a positionless recruiting strategy on the defensive side of the ball for Ohio State. And I think the best example of that maybe in any class that I can think of is Andre Turrentine, because, the experts can't even figure out where he's going to play.
I just, it's just amazing. We're in this NCAA imposed recruiting dead period. And there are a lot of people out there who really, I don't think, understand what a dead period is, which just means you can't visit a campus and they can't visit you. I have read, and I just, maybe I shouldn't poke fun, but it is tremendously enjoyable to read message boards in this time of year, because people just don't understand the rules. And the number of people who have said that Ohio State is not honoring the dead period by getting commitments is absolutely hilarious. It's, I don't know. It's just funny to me. I'm laughing at it because it is, I'll be honest. I thought, or I expected when this all happened in the last week, that we'd see a slowdown, but I guess it does make sense ultimately that these kids are saying, hey, I know where I want to be. Why am I going to waste my time? You can't play games in the recruiting world if there are no games to play. You know what I mean?
And it goes back to the thing where, like, I was never a recruit, but like, if I knew where I wanted to go, I would have just said it. And like, if these kids know where they want to go and now they can't visit until June or July, why are they waiting? Because the likelihood of them already visiting is pretty good. They've already been on unofficial visits. They know what everything is. They know what the pitch is. They watch college football on TV. They know what to expect. And so if you know where you want to go, just commit now, because you're going to have to wait till June or July and just keep sitting there thinking about these unofficial visits and just wait to take more of them if you don't commit now.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that's what it is. There is no game to play. There is no recruiting game going on. So like, if you know where you want to be, if you want to be in that spot come 6 months from now when everything gets back to normal, you may find yourself on the outside looking in if you don't take full advantage of the opportunity to say yes. So it's turned out quite well for Ohio State, Spencer, and maybe it gets better this week. We'll see. As I mentioned, we'll see what happens with the guy in Virginia and Travion Henderson, and we'll go from there. But you and I can catch back up about that later. This has been Talking Stuff. It is the Ohio State Recruiting Podcast brought to you by Lettermen Row and sponsored by our good friends at Buyers Auto. That is Spencer. Hey, Spencer.
Before we get out of here, I just want to ask you one thing. You've been really good about You've been really good about proclamations lately. If you look at the team ranking right now, I know I'm going to keep asking you this, but as it continues to develop, does anybody catch Ohio State?
I mean, it's hard to say. Again, like last year, Ohio State had 3 5-star guys and like 4 or 5 different other guys who were top 75 players in the class, and they finished 5th. So that was a class that was obviously built a little bit differently, and you're dealing with a handful of guys that they took early in the process, developmental guys around the state of Ohio that they're not taking in 2021. Ohio State will not finish lower than number 2 in this class if they end up getting a Travion Henderson or someone like that, because again, the difference between Travion Henderson and Donovan Edwards in the ranking is not that much. Like Donovan Edwards is number 2, Travion Henderson's number 1, but in their ranking like point system, it is a major difference. So you need to have that kind of tremendous win. And it's funny, I mean, you look at guys like Troy Stellato, he's the top target for Ohio State at wide receiver and has been for 6 months. He is going to significantly lower their recruiting average, which is stupid, right? But
he'll continue to rise though. But yes, as of now,
right.
he would
as of right now, he would lower their ranking. But Ohio State obviously doesn't care that much about that. But that said, they want to win. If JT Tuamalo and Emeka Ibuka and Travion Henderson join a class that is already existing, that's the number 1 ranked class in the country by a wide margin, and then you throw in Jagger Burton or J.C. Latham, and then you throw in a couple defensive linemen that are all going to be highly ranked, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to catch them. But when you're talking about Georgia, who's won the last 2 recruiting championships, Alabama and Clemson, anything can happen. But I certainly think it's further proof that we are seeing a NCAA basketball type of effect with the highest ranked players in the country, where quite simply they're looking at 4 or 5 schools and that's it. And I think the Buckeyes are in a position right now to end up winning the recruiting championship, which they haven't done since 2008. So should be an interesting few weeks, and it's going to get even more interesting again, like I said, if Travion Henderson decides to shock the world and end his recruitment without taking a visit to a number of his top targets or his top options. So anyway, Spencer, Holbrook, Jeremy Birmingham, Lettermen Row. Find us online at lettermenrow.com. Continue to rate and review and subscribe on our podcasts and YouTube channels and everything else. Spencer, we'll talk soon. Everyone, stay safe, get some rest, keep yourselves isolated, and keep yourselves listening to us at Lettermen Row and no one else. That's fine. You can listen to other people. Bye now.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and you know we got Buckeye IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.